Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to join you for this online event on women, leadership and sport. And I wish to thank Italia Sport and Salute for inviting me to take part in this important meeting and providing me the opportunity to reflect on its theme from the perspective of the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs in New York City. I am Daniela Bas, a woman in a leadership position whose division at the United Nations Secretariat has the global mandate on sport for development and peace. And I also have a physical disability since I was a child. And I believe that sport and physical activities are a key tool to promote inclusion, really leaving no one behind. Today with you, I have a few points to present, and I shall start from giving you a general description of the mandated activities of the Division for Inclusive Social Development in DESA that I have the honor to lead. I will give you an overview of what we do, what the United Nations 2030 Agenda and its 17 goals are, including the preamble of the 2030 Agenda that makes reference to sport as an enabler for development and peace, as well as on how sport can accelerate the 2030 Agenda and the social dimension of sustainable development, the well-being of people, and of course also international cooperation. And then I shall explore with you what actions on sport member states and the United Nations system as a whole are taking vis-à-vis sport in general and with reference on the present pandemic as well. So let me start with presenting who we are and what we do. The Division for Inclusive Social Development, DISD, is part of the Department of Economic and Social Affairs, DESA, of the UN Secretariat with headquarters in New York City. And DESA, through the Division for Inclusive Social Development, has the global mandates for the whole UN system on vulnerable groups of people. And I mean indigenous peoples, older persons, persons with disabilities, and youth. The themes we deal with are eradicating poverty, fostering inclusion and participation, promoting employment and decent jobs, and reducing inequalities. And the issues we deal with are cooperatives, families, and sport for development and peace since 2017, when the ISD in DESA in New York started housing the substantive portfolio on sport for development and peace in the UN system. That is, from the moment the United Nations the Secretary General closed the office of his Special Envoy on Sport for Development and Peace in Geneva and brought back sports for development and peace to the UN Secretariat. The Division for Inclusive Social Development in DESA has been working to maximize the positive contribution of sport, including as a tool to counter violent extremism, through the United Nations Action Plan on Sport. Well, it has long been recognized that sport can make important contributions to both development and peace, and it has a unique capacity to unite people regardless of identity, background, or ability. And in view of this, in preparing the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, member states included in its preamble sport as an enabler, as an important enabler of sustainable development, highlighting the growing contribution of sport to the realization of the development and peace. And the 2030 Agenda, in its guiding framework with its 17 goals, the SDGs for sustainable development globally, has aimed to achieve this agenda by the year 2030. And the central aspect of the 2030 Agenda is its call to leave no one behind. And therefore, if the SDGs are to succeed, it is critical that they are implemented for and with the participation of social groups that have tended to be among the most left behind, including persons with disabilities and older persons and indigenous peoples, just, to mention a few. Sport, therefore, is an effective tool to accelerate the SDGs implementation because it enhances inclusion and participation of all people, of all ages, and of all abilities. It promotes peace and mutual respect, counters the social barriers, and is a powerful tool in promoting sustainable development and human rights. One of the ways in which DESA has been carrying out its mandate on sport for development and peace is through its research and thought leadership in relation to sport for development and peace. For example, DESA and the division prepares the biennial report of the Secretary General of the United Nations on sport as a global accelerator of peace and sustainable development for all, that then is discussed and negotiated by member states during the UN General Assembly. DESA gives the space to all, from member states to the UN funds like UNICEF and programs like UNDP and specialized agencies like UNESCO, ILO, WHO, just to mention a few, and other UN entities like UN Women or resident coordinators in the field and the private sector, academia, NGOs, and individuals to discuss together about sport-related matters. And we also work in a very collaborative manner with the whole UN family, benefiting of their expertise, for instance, in education and science and sport, UNESCO, or the environment and sport, UNEP, or employment and sport, ILO, or children and sport, UNICEF, and so on and so forth, to have a global overview of sport in all its dimensions: economic, social, environmental, cultural, and political, in an inclusive manner, meaning that we make sure that all vulnerable groups are part of the discourse, taking into account all the frameworks in place on the issue of sport. I'll give you an example. In 2020, the Secretary General published a report on sport, a global accelerator of peace and sustainable development for all, which reviewed progress, towards the implementation of the UN Action Plan on Sport for Development and Peace, drawing on inputs received from member states, the UN family, the UN system, and other stakeholders. In fact, member states, in partnership with the United Nations, have been fostering greater cross-sectoral alignment of their work on sport at the national level, including establishing national policy frameworks for mainstreaming sport in development processes, with the aim to accelerate the implementation of the 2030 Agenda also through sport. In fact, the UN family is advancing sport as a tool to accelerate the achievement of the SDGs through their respective mandates, strengthening a shared common vision and policy approach to guide the work of member states. And lastly, I have to talk about sport and COVID-19. Unfortunately, we cannot talk about sport and the SDGs today without acknowledging the impact of COVID-19 on both the world of sport and its contributions to the SDGs achievement. So, in May of 2020, UN DESA published a policy brief on sport and COVID-19, focusing on the impact of the pandemic on sport, physical activities, and the well-being of people, and its effects on the social dimension of development, and setting out also recommendations seeking to both support the safe reopening of sporting events following the pandemic and to maximize the benefits that sport and physical activity can bring in the age of COVID-19 and beyond. And 118 countries signed a joint statement as an expression of support for this brief. Then, last December, on the 15th of December, DESA further launched an advocacy brief co-led by UN Women entitled Recovering Better, Sport for Development and Peace, Reopening, Recovery, and Resilience post-COVID-19. And the brief was collaboratively drafted by sport focal points in the following entities: the World Health Organization, the UN Office for Drugs and Crime, UNESCO, the UN Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, the International Labour Organization ILO, the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, UN Children's Fund, UNICEF, the UN Office of the Special Representative of the Secretary General on Violence Against Children, UN Climate Change, the UN Environment Programme, UNEP, and the UN Office on Counterterrorism. And this brief sets out a vision to support the reopening, recovery, and resilience of sport. And it highlights critical intersects between sport, physical activity, the achievement of selected SDGs, and the COVID-19 impact. And in conclusion, would you be interested in knowing what the United Nations Commission for Social Development has discussed this February about the role of digital technologies, the well-being of people, and social development, and the various side events that took place around this topic, also through the lenses of sport, please visit our website of UNDASA and look for the ISD or contact us. We are more than happy to share our knowledge and establish new partnerships. Thank you.